Peace, brothers and sisters. This is Hua Qi. Thank God it is time again for our Bible reading. Let's continue to read Genesis 28. Today we will start from verse 6. Yesterday we read Isaac sent Jacob to Paddan-aram and to take a wife from among the daughters of Laban. He also repeated the blessings God gave to Abraham. This confirmed Jacob as the blessed one. Verse 6. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan-aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite woman." Verse 7. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan-aram. From these two verses, we see that Esau saw three things. First, Isaac blessed Jacob. Thus, he knew clearly that he had lost the blessings of the firstborn. After the blessing, Isaac sent Jacob to Paddan-aram to take a wife. Esau's first reaction was, maybe this blessing was related to a wife. This was the first thing he saw. Second, when Isaac was blessing Jacob, he said to not marry a Canaanite woman. At this time, Esau already married two Hittite women. Third, Jacob obeyed his parents immediately and started for Paddan-aram. Esau was a simple man. From what he saw, he came to a conclusion. Verse 8. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac, his father. Actually, Esau did not have to wait until now to understand this. Chapter 26, verse 34 to 35, recorded when Esau was 40 years old, he married two Hittite women. These two wives were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Years ago, he should have already understood this. He was a careless man who valued pleasure in life. He did not even know about his parents' grief because of his wives until one day he lost his blessings as the firstborn son. Then he realized this was something serious. From the instant of Isaac sending Jacob to Paddan-aram, he concluded that Isaac was displeased by the Canaanite women. This was not the main reason. The real reason was that he despised his first birthright. From what he saw, Esau made a conclusion. This conclusion was not accurate, yet based on this, he made his next move. Verse 9. Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. He thought, since the parents were displeased with Canaanite women and sent Jacob to Paddan-aram to take a wife, then the problem was his wives. Jacob went to Paddan-aram to find a wife. He could go to his uncle and find a wife there. At the beginning, Abraham realized Isaac was the promised son. He sent away his firstborn son Ishmael. Because of Abraham's intercession, God also blessed Ishmael. Ishmael also became a great nation. To please his father, Esau went to Ishmael and married a daughter of Ishmael. He was a natural man. He did not have any close relationship with God. Thus, God was never in his mind when making a decision. Since he did not know God, nor understand God's will, the decisions he made were all from outside. Dear brothers and sisters, following God had to be in your spirit. You must build the relationship with God. When your spiritual senses become sharp, you will know the leading from God for everything. We will not just see the surface of the things and make rash decisions. When things are not clear, we'd rather wait. We come before God and wait for the things to clear up. especially for us, the New Testament believers. Jesus Christ promised us that seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. We needed to hold on tight to this right and bring everything before God. On one hand, we ask and listen. On the other hand, we needed to be patient and not run ahead of God. In the end, we will be able to understand God's leading for us. Following God is something very subjective. There are also principles in this. These principles were all recorded in the Bible. When we are reading the Bible, we needed to learn to put off our natural views and humble ourselves before God and ask God to speak to us in timely manner. Once we have His words, we need to think them over and verify them through the circumstances. Then we can understand God's daily leading for us. If you are willing to read the scriptures carefully, you will find many spiritual revelations from some scriptures that seems to be very straightforward. From Genesis chapter 12, when Abraham appeared, God used calling to call men out of the old creation to follow Him. From Abraham and Isaac's experiences, we see that they both encountered famines. Isaac went to Gerar, where Philistines were. God appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt." When Abraham encountered the first famine, he went down to Egypt. What's the differences between Egypt and Gerar? When it was time for Isaac to get married, Abraham sent his old servant to his own country, Paddan Aram, and there he found Rebekah for Isaac. Now it was time for Jacob to get married. He also needed to go to Paddan Aram to find a wife. What is the difference between Paddan Aram and a Philistine? Esau knew that his parents did not like Canaanite women. He went to Ishmael and found a wife there. What does Ishmael represent? If we are not careful when reading the Bible, we often will regard Egypt, the Philistines, the Paddan Aram, the Ishmaelites, and even the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, simply as the world. In a way, this was right. If we look at it in such a general way, many details of the Bible will be lost. It will be difficult to have new light, new inspiration, and a new revelation from the Bible. We are halfway through Genesis by now. We spent a half year in this, so we should know the background. Based on what we read, from the foreshadowing point of view, to see the differences between tribes. First, we needed to know that Abraham was a new beginning in God. Before Abraham, from Adam to Noah was the first human era. Because of the corruption of that era, God judged that era with flood. It was a new beginning from Noah. Noah's prophecies in chapter 9, verse 24 to 27 set the path and destinations for the descendants of his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 24, when Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers." He had three sons. Ham was mentioned first, and Ham's son Canaan was a representative. Verse 26, he also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Shem's character was that Jehovah is the God of Shem. The nation of Shem knew God and would serve God. Verse 27, may God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. The character of Japheth was expansion. Because of worshiping God, Shem had tents of God. Japheth would live in the tents of Shem. Genesis 10 recorded the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their territories and boundaries. We see that Ham's descendants were most flourished one. They produced a hero, Nimrod. He was the king who built the Tower of Babel. In the instant of Tower of Babel, God confused man's language. Men could no longer communicate and were scattered all over the earth. In Noah's prophecy, Canaan would be cursed. Canaan would be the promised land for Abraham and his descendants. Canaanites would be cast out. Shem's descendants would be serving God. Thus, the 10th generation after Shem, Abraham was born. He was the first one who was called by God and followed him. In the experiences of Abraham and Isaac, we recognize that Egypt represented the world of pleasure. The Egyptian ancestor was Mizraim, Ham's descendants. Thus, God did not want Abraham to stay in Egypt. When Isaac wanted to go to Egypt because of the famine, God stopped him and he stayed in Gerar. Egypt was a place with abundant riches. It was easy for men to fall into sin and pleasure. It was a place connected to man's lust. Thus, when Israelites went to Egypt later, they became slaves there. God sent Moses to save the Israelites from Egypt. Gerar, located between Egypt and Canaan. Egypt represented pleasure and the world of the flesh. Gerar represented the rational world of soul. Philistines were in Gerar. They originally came from Cyprus Island. The residents of the island were the descendants of Japheth. They went to Canaan by boats and became the Philistines in the Bible. They were very rational. When Abraham went down to Gerar, he met King Abimelech. The king called himself with a clear conscience and a clean hands. God acknowledged that. In the instant of Abraham called Sarah his sister, King Abimelech seemed to be more righteous than Abraham. However, God asked King Abimelech to beg Abraham to pray for him because Abraham was a prophet. Thus, Philistines represented a rational world. They lived and moved under the principles of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They seemed to be more noble than Egyptians. Yet when God's people received God's blessings, they would be jealous. They asked to sign a treaty with Abraham and later with Isaac. They did not know God and kept their distances from God's people. In the end, they had no share in God's salvation. Canaan was a promised land God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It represented the spiritual inheritance of a man who followed God. Northeast of Canaan was Paddan Aram. People lived there were all the descendants of Shem. It was the place where God called Abraham out of. Paddan Aram became Assyria and Babylon empires. They were all the descendants of Shem. For they did not know God. The land was full of idolatry. They should be serving God, yet they did not know God. Paddan Aram represented the world of religion. Egypt represented the world of flesh and pleasure. It was full of lust. Gerar, where Philistines were, represented a rational world. They lived and acted by their mind. Paddan Aram represented the world of religion. They should be serving God, yet did not know God. They invented many methods and worship ceremonies. They thought they were serving God in a religious atmosphere. Canaan represented a right spiritual position for following God and serving Him. Egypt represented men enticed by lust and fell into the world of pleasure. Gerar represented men enticed by the mind and fell into the world of rationalism and be separated from spiritual things. Padam Aram was dominated by will and fell into the world of religion. Thus, they serving God without God and worship God apart from God. Knowing this, we can understand deeper the record of the Bible. After Abraham, there were a few more people. One was Lot, who followed Abraham from the beginning. He himself was not called by God, yet because of following Abraham, he became someone who knew God. He could not completely follow God. He had incest with his daughters, and after Sodom was destroyed, thus Moabites and Amorites were born. He represented a man who knew God yet could not overcome his lust, and produced descendants from incest. After Lot, Abraham had Ishmael from Hagar besides Isaac. He also had 6 sons from Keturah. These were all the descendants of Abraham. They were all in the position of being called by God. Among them, Isaac was the only one stood in the position of inheritance. He could inherit all sorts of spiritual blessings God gave to Abraham. Though Ishmael and the descendants of Keturah also connected to Abraham and God's calling, they missed the grace and could not fully enjoy all sorts of spiritual blessings God prepared for Abraham. Esau and Jacob were twins, born of Isaac. Jacob inherited the birthright and blessings as the firstborn, and eventually had 12 sons who became 12 tribes of Israel and became God's people. Esau stood in Abraham's calling and enjoyed many blessings with Isaac. However, he despised his birthright, thus had nothing to do with Israelites. Edomites, the descendants of Esau, was blood relatives of Israelites. They represented those who stood in the position of being called. They used to enjoy the spiritual blessings, yet because of their own needs in flesh, they sold the blessings as the firstborn. Only by standing in Abraham's calling, experiencing Isaac's all sorts of blessings, and going through all kinds of God's molding in you in the way of Jacob, can you become a real Israelite on the road of sanctification. Dear brothers and sisters, this is the destination God gave to every one of His children. In our daily choices, we will face the world of lust like Egypt, or the rational world like Gerar, or the world of religion like Padam Aram. On the way of following God, it was easy for us to step out of our called position and miss the blessings of enjoyment, or despise God-given birthright and not letting go of our natural self, nor willing to be molded. Thus, in the end, we will miss the blessings of firstborn. We ask God to help us. Those who endured to the end will be saved. Let's pray. Lord, please give us the will of Jacob. We wanted to have the good blessings. We are not complete nor holy, yet because our desire for your good blessings, you continue to mold us. Please get rid of the part in us that displeased you, our flesh and a natural self. Bless my life so every part will be counted worthy before you. In Jesus' name, amen.